Welcome back to Cursed by Choice, the place where we dive into the quiet, unsettling corners of ordinary lives, stories that feel real, raw, and sometimes unbearably human. Today's story takes you inside the life of a man who practices conversations aloud every day, not because anyone is listening, but because the silence of the world has become his only companion. It's a tale of loneliness, persistence, and the fragile hope that someone, anyone, might one day notice he exists. Let's get to the story and listen to his own words.
Hi there, my name is Charles Edward, and I'm just an ordinary man trying to get by in a quiet world. I've spent years rehearsing conversations in front of mirrors, asking strange questions I'll never hear answers to, and even keeping a diary of small moments no one will ever read. I walk the same streets every morning, visit the same grocery store, and try to smile at people who barely notice me. But I do it anyway, because it's the only way I remember how to exist. I wake up before the sun, though I can barely remember why. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's because silence hits harder at night. The house is empty. Not because anyone left recently, no, it's been empty for years, but because the walls themselves seem to hold a quiet that presses against my ears. I make my way to the bathroom, the floor cold under my slippers, and stare into the mirror. The face looking back is older than I remember. The lines are sharper, the eyes smaller, but I try to smile anyway. Just to practice smile. Just to see if it still works. I start my routine. Brush teeth, shave, wash face. I talk to myself while I do it. Morning, old man, I say, though no one responds. The mirror doesn't respond. The echo in the bathroom doesn't care. But it matters to me. It always has. I have conversations here that I will never have anywhere else. I rehearse words I might need. I practice greetings. I practice jokes. I practice asking about someone's day. And I practice listening to the answers, even if they'll never come. By the time I make my way to the kitchen, the house has settled into its usual rhythm of emptiness. I pour myself a cup of coffee and sit at the table. I talk to the chair across from me. You know, I think today might be the day someone talks back. I laugh softly at my own voice. The chair does not answer. It never does. I sip the coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, and imagine a conversation with someone, anyone. Someone who doesn't exist, but who might, if the universe were fair. I rehearse the trip to the store. I repeat the greetings I will say. Good morning, how are you today? I say it aloud. Then I try it differently. Morning. How's it going? I nod at myself. Maybe this one works better. I imagine the cashier smiling. I imagine her answering. I imagine her pausing, maybe remembering me from last week. Maybe she even cares, a little. Sometimes I talk to the shelves, to the rows of cereal boxes and canned soup, practicing small talk. I ask them questions no one will answer. Do you like this weather? I ask the rice. Did you sleep well last night? I ask the bread. I know it sounds strange. I know it sounds pathetic. But I also know that when I leave this house, I will be talking to silence again, and silence is cool if you want to hear it. I dress slowly, each layer deliberate. My coat, my scarf, my hat. I check my reflection in the hallway mirror, again rehearsing. Excuse me, could you pass the sugar? Would you like your receipt? Thank you, have a nice day. I repeat them like prayers, like spells meant to summon human connection. Sometimes I catch myself saying things I will never need. How's your daughter? Did you sleep well? The questions hang in the air, unanswered, but I ask them anyway. I mean to hear them. I mean to hear the sound of my own concern bouncing off a wall that cannot return it. When I finally step outside, I feel the cold bite at my cheeks. I talk quietly to the air, practicing a cheerful tone because people expect cheer. I imagine someone noticing my presence, someone nodding even, and I hope that maybe today someone will. I step onto the street, the air sharp and slightly damp, carrying the faint scent of early frost. The sidewalks are empty, except for the occasional neighbor rushing past, their eyes fixed on the ground, the phone in their hands, or the urgent tasks of a day. I greet them softly, almost instinctively. Good morning, I murmur, not expecting an answer. Most of the time, I don't get one. A nod, a mumbled response, sometimes nothing at all. I carry on, pretending to notice, pretending it matters, but the silence always lingers, pressing closer with every step. The grocery store is just down the block. I can see it from here, the large glass windows reflecting the pale morning sky. I tell myself I'm going to be brave today. Brave enough to actually speak, brave enough to make my presence known. I walk in, the automatic door sliding open with a soft whoosh, and I take a deep breath. The store smells of polished floors, fresh buildings, and plastic packaging, a smell that, for me, is somehow comforting. I pass the aisle slowly, not because I need anything, but because the act of moving through space is a rehearsal for human interaction. I pick up a can of soup, hold it in my hand, and imagine offering it to someone. Would you like this? I practice quietly under my breath. The cashier, a young woman with short brown hair and tired eyes, walks up from my scanner. I smile. I clear my throat. Good morning, I say, loud enough for her to hear but soft enough to seem casual. She nods, her fingers moving over the keys without pause. I repeat my greeting. How are you today? She glances at me for a fraction of a second, then back down at the items moving past her scanner. No smile. No warmth. Just the mechanical hum of her task. I feel a flicker of disappointment, sharp, familiar, but I push it aside. I adjust my coat, rearrange my scarf, and try again. Busy morning, huh? My voice shakes slightly, betraying the hope I feel beneath the practiced exterior. She doesn't respond, but her eyes linger on mine for a split second longer than usual. Maybe she notices. Maybe today is different. I place the soup on the counter, my hands trembling slightly as I rehearse my words again. Would you like a receipt? I say, imagining her smiling, imagining her pausing her work just for a moment to acknowledge me. She hands me the bag without looking up. I nod, pretending it's exactly the interaction I wanted. Pretending I don't care that it isn't. I move down the aisles, talking quietly to myself, rehearsing conversations I will never have. I ask questions out loud, testing my voice, testing the sound of it in the open air. How's your morning going? I whisper to a row of cereal boxes. Did you sleep well? I ask a bird. Sometimes, when I speak to the items on the shelves, I imagine their answers. A cheerful, fine. From the cereal, a soft, I did, thank you, from the bird. It's not real, but it feels real enough to sustain me. I pause in front of a dairy section, staring at the cartons of milk. I rehearse another conversation, this one more complex, with someone who might care about the details. Do you need this for breakfast or lunch? I ask the milk aloud. I imagine the person nodding, answering in kind, asking questions back. I imagine the warmth of her voice, the small laugh that follows a joke, the shared rhythm of two humans simply acknowledging each other's presence. But of course, no one answers. The hum of refrigeration, the distant beep of the scanner, the shuffle of other customers' carts, these are the only sounds. My own voice echoes back at me faintly, a shadow of connection that disappears the moment I move on. I grip the handle of my basket tighter, as if holding onto some fragment of reality that might slip away entirely. I move toward the checkout line, a little longer this time, rehearsing a small conversation that will likely go unnoticed. Did you have a good weekend? I asked the cashier softly, almost in a whisper, hoping she'll meet my gaze, hoping she'll pause long enough to acknowledge that I exist. She doesn't. She glances up briefly, then back down, scanning items with automatic precision. I take my bag, pee, and step outside again, the cold air hitting my face like a reality check. The warmth of my imagined interaction fades quickly, replaced by the emptiness of the street, the quietness of the morning. I walk home slowly, retracing the path I took earlier, speaking quietly to myself, asking the same rehearsed questions. No one answers. No one notices. And yet, I continue. Every day, I continue. Because if I don't practice, if I don't rehearse, I might forget how to speak, how to care, how to expect anything at all. The loneliness is a heavy weight, but it is a weight I have learned to bear because the alternative, doing nothing, is worse. Back in my house, I place the groceries on the counter, carefully arranging each item, as if preparing them will prepare me for some larger interaction. I sit in the empty kitchen, talking quietly to the chair across from me, recounting every small detail of the store visit. She didn't smile, I whisper, but I think she noticed me, just a little. I pause, staring at the empty seat, imagining a nod, a word, a fleeting acknowledgement. I take another sip of coffee and rehearse again. Tomorrow, I say softly, maybe tomorrow will be different. And I know, deep down, that it probably won't. But the act of hoping, of rehearsing, of speaking to the air, is enough to keep me moving, enough to keep me alive in a world that so often forgets people like me. I sit in my chair long after the coffee has gone cold, staring at the empty kitchen. The sunlight streaming through the window creates long, sharp lines across the floor, slicing the emptiness into pieces. I close my eyes and let my mind drift, back to times when I wasn't alone, when words were spoken to me, not rehearsed to the walls. I remember laughter that wasn't mine alone, the warmth of a hand on mine, the small acknowledgement that I existed in someone else's world. I remember the mornings when my wife would leave for work, and I'd ask, "Did you sleep well?" And she'd answer, smiling, "I did, thank you." Her voice would linger, not just in the air, but in me. I can still hear it if I try hard enough. Some days, I hear it so clearly it feels like she is standing right beside me, and for a brief second, the house is no longer empty. I think of my children, grown now, their own lives spinning far away from mine. They call sometimes, or maybe they send a text. The words are polite, distant. They are busy, I tell myself. They have lives I cannot fit into, and they have nothing to offer but silence and old routines. I imagine calling them more often, asking about the small details of their days, trying to insert myself into their worlds, but I stop. I stop because every unanswered question feels heavier than the last. Loneliness is not just an absence of people. It is a presence of memory, of expectation, of all the conversations that could have been. I practice them anyway, because if I do not, I feel the words will vanish entirely. I feel that the sound of my own voice will die in me, leaving only emptiness where thought and speech once lived. I walk to the window and look out at the street below. A dog trots past, followed by its owner, laughing at something I cannot hear. I practice smiling at them. "Good morning," I whisper. "How are you today?" My words hang in the air, unacknowledged. The owner glances at me briefly, distracted, and moves on. I watch them disappear around the corner, and a hollow ache settles in my chest. I remember the mistakes I made, the words I should have spoken but didn't. The friendships I neglected, thinking I had time, thinking they would always wait. I replay moments over and over, conversations that never happened, apologies I never delivered, the silences I filled with stubborn pride instead of connection. I feel the weight of each one like a stone pressing on my chest. And yet, there is a strange kind of hope in all of it. A hope that maybe tomorrow, someone will respond. Maybe tomorrow, the cashier will look up, or a neighbor will pause, or a stranger will nod, just long enough to acknowledge that I exist. That small recognition is what I live for. Not warmth, not affection, not company, just acknowledgement. A sign that the world remembers me even briefly. I practice more conversations, imagining voices, faces, and laughter. I rehearse the words I would say if anyone were listening. Did you have a good weekend? How's your morning? Would you like some help with that? I repeat them until my throat aches, until my voice is rough and hoarse, until the echoes in the empty house answer me in a way no human ever will. Sometimes I speak louder, almost daring the silence to respond. Can you hear me? I ask the walls. Does anyone hear me? My own voice rattles back like a fragile reflection, distorted and weak. I pause, listening to the sound, counting the seconds of nothing. And I realize it is enough. That tiny, trembling echo is enough to remind me that I still exist. That I still care. The day stretches on. I move from one room to another, repeating phrases I will never hear answered. I clean, I dust, I arrange things in patterns that no one will notice. I make tea, set out a plate, sit alone, and speak to the chair across from me, imagining someone sitting there. I imagine the shared glances, the half smiles, the quiet comfort of someone present. And when night falls, and the darkness settles across the house like a heavy blanket, I practice again. I whisper into the shadows, speaking to the empty air, practicing the words I will say tomorrow, next week, next year. Because if I stop, I fear that silence will consume me entirely. And I will no longer remember what it means to speak, to hope, to care. So I continue. I rehearse. I speak. I hope. And I wait. Night falls, but I do not sleep. The house is still, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my feet. I light a single lamp, just enough to cut away the shadows that seem too heavy when unbroken. I sit at the kitchen table again, the chair across from me empty as always, and I speak. Not rehearsed phrases this time, not the polite greetings or imagined jokes, but fragments of memories, pieces of a life that no one asked about. I remember when we used to laugh, I say quietly, the words shaking in the air. I remember mornings when the house smelled of fresh bread and coffee, when someone actually noticed me, when someone cared. I pause, waiting for a response that will never come, but I let myself linger there, letting the memory fill the emptiness. I think of all the conversations I never had, all the questions I never asked, all the moments I let pass because I was too proud, too distracted, too afraid. I feel the weight of each one pressing on me like stones piled in a silent tomb. And yet, I do not despair. There is something stubborn inside me, something that refuses to vanish completely, that clings to the hope that tomorrow, someone will notice. I rise and walk to the window. The street outside is quiet, the night air crisp, carrying the faint sounds of distant cars and the occasional dog barking. I imagine the people walking past, each with their own lives, their own routines, their own silences. I wonder if any of them will ever pause long enough to see me, not just my form, but the person inside, the one who practiced conversations for years, who rehearsed kindness in a house that never answered, who held on to hope when hope seemed absurd. I speak to the air again, softly, almost as a prayer. Tomorrow, maybe someone will hear me. Tomorrow, maybe someone will answer. Maybe someone will nod, or smile, or remember that I exist. I know it may never happen. I know that the world often forgets people like me. But the act of hoping is itself a kind of life, a defiance against the nothingness that presses at the edges of my days. I move through the house, room by room, carrying small acts of care. I straighten the chair, dust the shelf, fold the towel. Each movement is deliberate, a rehearsal for some interaction I may never have, a small proof that I am still here, still capable of action, still capable of care. The house is empty, but my voice fills it, and for a moment, it does not feel empty at all. I return to the kitchen, sit down, and pick up the cup of cold coffee. I take a sip and close my eyes, letting the warmth linger. I speak again, quietly, softly, as if the walls themselves might answer me this time. I exist, I say. I am still here. I still care. And in that moment, even though no one replies, even though the house remains silent, even though the world outside continues without me, I feel a flicker of something fragile and powerful, acknowledgement, if only for myself. I realize then that this is my life now, not tragedy, not despair, but persistence. Not loneliness, but endurance. Not absence, but presence. I am the man who practices conversations. I am the man who walks the aisles of empty stores, who speaks to chairs and shelves, who rehearses words no one will hear. And yet, I am here. I am alive. I am remembered, at least by myself, and in that remembrance lies a strange, quiet dignity. I turn off the lamp, leaving only the faint glow of the streetlights outside. I sit in the darkness, listening to the soft hum of the night, letting it cradle me. I speak one last time before sleep finally overtakes me. Tomorrow, I whisper, I will speak again. I will hope again. I will be here. And I know I will. Because some people, like me, exist not for the applause, not for the acknowledgement of others, but for the simple, stubborn act of continuing to exist, of continuing to speak, of continuing to care. And that, I think, is enough.